Okay, Professor.
Where should I face you, I suppose?
Yes.
Okay.
Could you please tell us? I just read a few words about from your mind,
Yes.
and it's a very interesting aspect that we would like very much, at least in our country, to apply also. You have the academia experience,
Yes.
and you had the courage to start a business
Yes.
after this. And as far as I know, it's the American model.
It is the American model. It's not that common for this particular type of technology to happen, but actually at Stanford University, I've been a privilege to be a professor there for many years, and I worked at SLAC National Accelerator Laboratory. And in doing research for actually high energy physics, I ran into this idea of a storage ring interacting with a laser. I was working on it with a graduate student, and the university was very interested in issuing a patent and getting a patent done, and they did that. And then I didn't think too much of it for a while because, being an academic person, I hadn't thought very much about a business or that sort of thing. But then another student of mine, Rod Lowen, who actually is a founder of Lincian, wanted to work on his PhD. He wanted to work on a commercial application of the technology. And so he approached me. I said, sure, let's do it. While you're doing your PhD, we can look on the commercial application. And it turned out there was this tremendous interest. And so it struck me that the type of work that I do is really to bring science to society. And that one way of doing that is to develop a technology that can be commercially bring science broadly to people throughout the world. And as you may know, these large facilities are billion-dollar facilities, and there's only a handful in the world. It seemed to me that it might be possible to miniaturize that with this new technology, that is a miniaturized electron beam, a miniaturized storage ring, so that an institute, a university, or a small institute could have their own device. And so we started a business to do that. The National Institutes of Health in the United States funded it primarily for the development of protein crystallography, X-rays for protein crystallography. This happened in the early 2000s because of the Protein Structure Initiative. It turned out that our first sale had to do with imaging instead, but that's what happens with science. Sometimes applications emerge that are different than what you had expected. So as we moved along, we did explore gamma rays too, and all the while I was spending a lot of my time at SLAC in my job as a professor there. Recently I retired a few years ago, and now I'm full-time at Lincian. And so we have been, again, looking at storage rings to produce light, and one of those applications is actually lithography for producing semiconductor chips. So when Eli MP came along, we realized that there was a marriage of these two technologies that we've been developing that would perfectly fit to Eli MP.
But what is there in your philosophy? I'm sorry for insisting, but what is there in your philosophy that makes you go so easily to business?
So how much does it count that Stanford is in the Silicon Valley, surrounded, to say so, by companies, private companies?
It's a good point you make. The inhibitions are not there at Stanford. Stanford has facilitated the development and spin-offs from companies throughout the and many people at Stanford University have had spin-off companies. So I wasn't afraid of doing it. But I would not have done it if I didn't feel that it would have a deeper impact on society. I wasn't interested in forming just a random company to see if I could make a little money. That particularly didn't interest me, but it did interest me to have an impact on society. And so I think that's the thing that drove me to do it, because it's not easy. It's extremely difficult. And having two jobs is not easy either. So, but it's been very fulfilling, actually. I found that the business community is quite stimulating. There's a lot of outstanding individuals throughout, from the legal profession to the business profession. There's just a lot of outstanding individuals to work with. I've worked most exclusively with scientists my whole life at Stanford. But having that exposure to a broader community of people was really, really wonderful. And also, I think, paying a special attention to the fact that you have to, ultimately, if you're trying to stimulate science, you have to deliver something that actually works really well. Because otherwise the scientist is just fiddling around and not doing their work. And so this was an attitude that we had from the beginning. Even though we were inventing a brand new technology, that it had to be something that could be utilized by scientists.
So, to what extent can we say that the principle your source is functioning is based on what SLAC is doing?
SLAC actually doesn't do this particular technology.
Yeah, well, that's why
it was something that I proposed in the mid-90s, but SLAC has never really developed this technology. There's an analogous device that synchrotrons use to accomplish a similar effect, and that is when electron beams are stored in these giant storage rings that are the size of football stadiums, many billions of electron volts of energy, they pass them through undulators which cause the beam to wiggle back and forth. That wiggling action creates a beam of X-rays. And the most powerful X-ray sources in the world are these devices called synchrotrons. And there's a handful of them around the world that are the most powerful. So if you replace this magnet, wiggling magnet, with a photon beam, it does the same thing. And that was the fundamental invention, if you will, but it was really a discovery of an application of something called inverse Compton scattering. Doesn't sound like scattering. It turns out they're equivalent. This wiggling action and the scattering are equivalent things. So, so Stanford doesn't have specifically this particular technology, but they have all the elements from which one can think through this. And this process of being able to think it through is what permitted Lincian to develop.
And the principle of this compact light source is what? And what's the absolute novelty, to say so?
So the principle of the compact light source, I'm going to go back to the X-ray version. The principle is that rather than a magnetic undulator, you use a light beam to wiggle the beam back and forth. Now, what difference does that make, you might ask? When you wiggle a light beam back and forth, the period is about a centimeter or two. When you wiggle an electron beam back and forth with a light beam, it's a micron. It's a factor of 10,000. That factor of 10,000 converts the light to X-rays, just like that. So that's the difference. The electron beam energy necessary to do this for when you use a light beam is only, let me say only, you may not realize this is only, but 40 million volts, 30 million volts, as compared to 5 billion volts. So you see that there is a difference, about a factor of 100. That factor of 100 means it's 100 times smaller. So you take something that's 300 meters in circumference or in diameter, and it becomes this big. Once it's this big, you could put more than one of our sources in this room. And if you take a giant synchrotron, it wouldn't fit in the building that Eli MP had.
You mean this new principle that you use for the X-rays, the same that is used now for the gamma?
Exactly. So what's and it's exactly the same principle.
The difference between CERN and Eli?
Well, it's interesting. The X-rays and gamma rays are really a part of the same thing. They're light at different wavelengths. And there's about a factor of 1,000 difference from kilovolts to megavolts. Gamma rays are measured in energy of a gamma ray photon is a megavolt, and the energy of an X-ray photon starts at a kilovolt or so. And so that's the difference in this factor of 1,000. So the factor of 1,000 means that you have to go up around a factor of turns out, a factor of 30, the square root of 1,000. And so the difference is that you go up from a few tens of megavolts to about 800 megavolts. That's this factor. And that's exactly what we're building. It's just that simple. Just a factor of taking a number and taking the square root of it.
Looking forward to meet you here at the beginning of 2023.
Oh, well,
Yes.
I hope to be back before then.
Okay, sure.
Many times. Yes, absolutely.
I would like to. It's about going a little bit back to what Simina asked before. So about the environment, about the Stanford,
Yes.
about Slack, for
Yeah,
example,
sure.
about the whole Silicon Valley
Yeah, sure.
philosophy, to say so. What do you think have changed in the mentality there in the last 20 years, 10 years, 20 years?
I would say people are pickier. I would say that was very easy to get investment a long time ago. We actually didn't get investment for many years. We just had grants. But by the time we needed investment, it became harder to get. Part of this was the Great Recession, right? Part of it was that. And then there was a downturn around the year 2000 or so with the semiconductor industry. And ironically, we benefited from that because there was a lot of free material available when we started our company. We had free chairs and free desks. But that's the main evolution that I believe I've seen. And I would have to say I'm not the most experienced person, but is that that everyone is very sensitive to when they make an investment that it pay off. And back in the days, 20 years ago, it was a little more fluid with that.
So the investors today are looking much more carefully to see if they get something.
That's what I believe. Yeah,
Thank you very much.
absolutely.
I've been there in 2000 and it was
Crazy.
It was crazy. Yes, it was
Yes.
the .com
Yes.
crash.
Yes.